Back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Volkan Oezdemir to defeat Daniel Cormier. And I'm here to talk about Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. This was a fight that was booked a few months ago, and then Raul got sick the night of the fight, and the fight was postponed. I mean, scratched, and I guess they booked it 3 months later, or whatever it is now. So I think that's only helped Raul. Not only is he not sick, but he's had 3 months to get better. And at 19 years old, he'll do more with those 3 months than anybody else in the UFC. But still, my initial pick for this fight was Ricky Turcios, and I am still going with Ricky, but I'm glad I got all my bets back the first time around when the fight was canceled, and I'm not going to bet nearly as much on Ricky in this one. He's still about the same odds, plus 200, but there's a lot of doubt against Raul Rosas Jr. I think Raul will rip him to the mat and dominate him early on. I think, and look, there's a chance he does that throughout the whole fight. I see what everybody else sees with Raul. But I also look to the one loss he had against Christian Rodriguez, who is, every time I talk about him, I say this, he's the best round three fighter in the UFC, or one of them anyway. And he was able to outlast Raul, and he wasn't able to get him out of there down the stretch. Raul Rosas Jr. survived, but he was done making things happen at about like the 6 minute mark of the fight. So it was a learning lesson, a lesson to be learned, and I'm sure he learned it. And how much wood could a woodchuck chuck and all that shit. But it's not like he's had that much time to erase that memory. He's only come back once. He knocked out Terrence Mitchell, who is, I think he's already cut. But either way, it wasn't the greatest win for Raul, but he won it in emphatic fashion and looked really good doing so. But I still want to see him in a more grueling competitive fight. I want to see things not go his way and how he handles it, because I know that's coming. If not in this fight, then in the next one or the one after that. So I still do pick Ricky Turcios, because while I think Ricky is not as much of a round three force as Christian Rodriguez, he's still a good round three fighter. Ricky Turcios is he's got really good cardio. He may not be the most physically imposing fighter, but he's good everywhere. And specifically, he's great at scrambling. He's a wily scrambler with great energy. And I think he's going to be contained and controlled early on by Raul. But I wonder about rounds 2 and 3. I think Ricky Turcios is going to turn this fight around in similar fashion to the way Christian Rodriguez did. And, have his back taken, hip into him, and take over from the top, I think. Ricky, he's been beaten 3 times. He was neutralized on the feet pretty much by Ayman Zahabi and Boston Salmon. I'm always about to say Boston Salmon, and then I have to think about it. It's Boston Salmon. But his other loss, he was knocked out against Mana Martinez. Mana Martinez, who was cut from the UFC last year. He may not have been the best guy, but he's very fucking dangerous. And that's the one guy to get Ricky Turcios out of there. And it was a violent finish, but still, that's it. And Ricky's been able to stand up to a lot of danger since then. Ricky's been scratching and clawing for victory since he got to the UFC. He's only 2-1, but his 2 victories are split decisions over Brady Hiestand in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter and Kevin Natividad in his last one. And they're both very close fights, but Ricky Turcios' cardio and output was there for him, and I thought he won both fights, despite them being close. On the regional scene before coming to the UFC, he's been a good scratch and claw third round fighter. Got a split decision again way back over Steve Garcia in Bellator. That was another great example of Ricky's traits. And on The Ultimate Fighter, he beat Dan Argueta and Ludovic Sholinian, both by round 3 decision as well. And Ricky was the better man down the stretch. So he may not be that imposing, but he's a great scrambler, and he is perhaps the best fighter, or maybe the second best fighter Raul Rosas Jr. has fought. So I think he's going to be able to make this one interesting. Raul Rosas Jr. is dominant in all of his wins but one. He's got 7 finishes in his 8 wins, 2 by knockout or TKO, and 5 by submission. We've seen him go through Jay Perrin, strangle him, knock out Terrence Mitchell. But the one guy to take him the distance was Mando Gutierrez on the Contender Series. Mando, who was on the Ultimate Fighter the following year, by the way. But Mando was dominated largely and really outgunned, but he kept himself in the fight and scrambled himself, forcing Raul Rosas Jr. to work. It wasn't a total shutout, but in the end, Raul Rosas Jr. answered every question and walked away with, on paper, a dominant victory. So that was a really good look for him, especially in retrospect, seeing how he looked in his one loss. But it's still the only time he's won like that. It's the only time he's won outside of round one, aside from this other fight where he choked the guy out. But all of his other wins are in round one, and he's still got questions to answer. I wonder about how he's going to look down the stretch. I wonder how he's going to look in a competitive fight with anybody, really, in rounds 2 and 3. I'll say this about Raul. He is so dominant that when he's fighting anybody who's durable, like Ricky Turcios, and has good cardio, I will throw the smallest of sprinkles on draw at plus 5,000 or plus 6,000. I don't do this for every fight. I barely do it every event, once a month. I don't even know. But every now and then a fight comes along where I say, yeah, maybe I'll waste $1 or two, try to win $100 or so. And I'll do that here with Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. Raul Rosas Jr. is probably a better 10-8 fighter than most. When he's controlling you, he's really working. And Ricky Turcios is very durable, and he's a wily, scrambly fighter. And we've seen on many occasions those split decisions I mentioned. He's been in some very close fights. So I think it's worth a stab if Raul's dominant early and Ricky, steals the second 2 rounds. But my prediction for the fight, I'm going with Ricky Turcios. Let's call it a majority decision. Just one judge gives Raul the 10-8 round in round 1. Don't harp on that. I'm just bullshitting here. But look, Ricky Turcios is my pick, and it's really only because I picked him to win the first time. And I've got too much pride to say I was wrong. But I'll be honest. When the first fight was canceled, I had money invested in Ricky, and I got all my money refunded. I was relieved because I was thinking for a while there, I think I made a pretty big mistake here. Like, I see what everybody else sees with Raul. He's a force, and I'll say this, no matter how the fight ends, in the beginning, Raul Rosas Jr. is going to be dominating Ricky Turcios, where everybody watching it is going to say, Turcios has no chance. And I think Ricky Turcios, there's a chance he's just totally dominated like that, and he never recovers. And, his scrambling is not there for him against a monster like Raul Rosas Jr. But, of course, there's a chance it is, and I'm sure those prop bets are going to be pretty juicy, so I'll be happy to waste money on them. And speaking of props, I can't say the only path to victory for Raul Rosas Jr.'s decision, but I'm pretty sure that's his top path to victory here. Again, he's only won one decision over the guy Mando Gutierrez, but I do consider Ricky Turcios to be a much better survivor than any of the guys he's finished. Ricky is that next level, and I can't compare him to Christian Rodriguez, but he's more in that class, where he might be the best guy that Raul Rosas Jr. has fought. So I think if he would win, it'd be by decision. Maybe he takes some risks early and then sees it's not worth it and just tries to secure top position. But that's his path to victory, and I'll look for the props. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.